So in this video, we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing fractions. Similarly to integers, where we talked about multiplying and dividing before we talked about adding and subtracting, we're going to do the same thing here. That's because we are going to be using some techniques that we learn here in order to add fractions. Multiplying fractions conceptually is pretty straightforward. If I'm multiplying a over b times c over d, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply straight across. I'm going to get the numerators a times c and denominators b times d. And of course, we're going to need to simplify. And simplification can happen while you're multiplying, or it can happen after. That's really up to you. Most people kind of do a mix of things. They might see something that could simplify right away at the beginning of the problem, and then at the end they realize they need to go a little bit further. But really, it's up to you. So real quick, let's look at a couple examples. Let's look at 2/3 times, let's see here, 5/4. So if I'm multiplying 2/3 by 5/4, if I'm just following the definition, it's 2 times 5 and 3 times 4. And I'm going to get 10/12. And we know we can simplify 10/12 because the numerator and denominator both have a 2 in common. And we can get 5/6 as an answer. So that's if I'm going straight with the definition. Now I said we can simplify as we're going, so I'll do it in this example, 2 different ways. 2/3 times 5/4. I guess it's a reminder that you can use a dot or a cross for multiplication. And what we're going to do is we're going to observe that since really the 2 is going to be divided by that 4 eventually, I can simplify them now. They have a common factor of 2. So let me grab my red pen here. And if I divide 2 by 2, I get 1. If I divide 4 by 2, I get 2. And so really I have a 1 times 5 and a 3 times 2. And that gives me 5/6. And more often than not, people go from this step to this step. They don't write that. You don't have to if you don't want to. But that's the real basic concept of multiplying fractions. That being said, there's some situations that we have to be careful with. If I'm multiplying 4 times 3/7, technically I'm multiplying 2 fractions. We might not think of 4 as a fraction, but we can always put 4 over 1 and make it a fraction. And I just proceed. And that's 12/7. So I can take whole numbers and multiply them by fractions, and it's not a big deal. Some people might be saying, well, shouldn't I make this a mixed number? And in algebra class, I will say this, that improper fractions are okay. You don't have to simplify improper fractions. You might say, well, that shouldn't that be 1 5/7? Well, it could be. And depending on your homework software that you're using, you might get an error because it's actually going to be looking for an improper fraction instead of a mixed number. And when you're doing algebra, again, a lot of times it's easier to use the improper fraction. But if you're handwriting a test, I guess it's really up to your instructor. I personally find with either. And the other one is, let's talk about some mixed numbers here. Let's do 2 3/5 and multiply that by 1/2. In order to multiply this, I actually do need this to be an improper fraction there, because I don't have a rule that allows me to multiply a mixed number by a fraction. You might recall that it was a over b and c over d. We didn't have anything in front of either. So let's go ahead and convert. So 2 times 5 plus 3 all over 5, using the trick we had learned in the last video. I'm going to multiply it by 1/2. And so I'm going to get 13/5 times 1/2. And my final answer is going to be 13/10. And that doesn't simplify any further. And again, improper fractions are okay. Division, we need something a little bit more of a tool here to use because we don't have it yet. And that's the idea of the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of a number, if I have 1/2, I flip it and I get 2/1 is my reciprocal. If I have 2/3, 3/2 would be the reciprocal. So basically the reciprocal of A over B is B over A. And in order to divide fractions, we need to know about this. And it turns out that division of fractions is really multiplication by the reciprocal. So if I have A over B and I'm dividing it by C over D, we're going to define that to be A over B times D over C. And we always flip the second fraction. We don't reciprocate the first one. It doesn't make sense. So real quick example, if I have 3/5 divided by 3/4, I'm going to use my rule, 3/5 times 4/3. I'm going to flip that second fraction. I can simplify that. These threes cancel out because 3 divided by 3 is 1. And I'm going to get 4/5 as my answer. So like we did in with multiplication, let's look at some other examples. If I have, let's see, 7/8 divided by 5, I can do this if I think about it as 7/8 times 1/5. I always take the reciprocal of the second fraction, regardless of what it looks like. I'm going to get 7/40. That one doesn't simplify any further. If I want to divide 4 by 3/4, well, again, I can think about that as 4/1 divided by 3/4. And I picked this on purpose. Some people want to cancel out those 4s, but you can't do that yet. Because the cancellation happens across multiplication, not cross division. 4/1 times 4/3. So we're going to flip again the second fraction. And it turns out there's really nothing to cancel out here because I have a 1 and a 3 on the bottom, and I have a pair of 4s on top for 16/3. And there's not much I can do with that. And you can also divide mixed numbers very much in the same way. Let's do one example. Let's do 1 3/4 divided by 2 1/2. Before I could do anything with this, I'm going to need to convert. So 4 plus 3 is 7/4 divided by 4 plus 1 is 5/2. 7/4 times 2/5, so 2/5. And I recognize I can do a simplification here. 2 and 1. And so I'm going to get 7/10 as my overall answer. And that there is our crash course in multiplying and dividing fractions.